Welcome to the Frictionless Innkeeper podcast. Coming right up, fresh tips and insights from lodging professionals aimed at helping you improve your business. Our podcast is brought to you by the Frictionless Guest App, the digital concierge that helps your guests to live like locals. Learn how at frictionlessguest.com. Steve Short, how are you?
It's me, the smart Alec. Hey, Matt, how are you?
Good to see you, my friend. You know what takes smarts is really, whenever you have a small business or any kind of business, is really revenue management and figuring out your pricing. Do you price too low? Do I price too high? If I do price too high, I'm scared I'm going to alienate guests. There's a big song and dance and a lot more to it than I ever really knew. And that's what was really uncovered today with Scot Fuller-Beatty from the Bold collaboration.
Yeah, revenue management's one of those things. Everybody can relate to revenue because without revenue, no business exists, right? And so the need to maximize revenue, manage it, especially in terms of the time of when you need it and those kinds of things is a core part of every business, but especially I think hospitality, lodging, innkeeping, it's like the timing, like he talks about seasons, that's so important. Differentiating guests and who you want to have and charge, how much you're going to charge them based upon not just seasons, but other things as well. And yeah, it probably seems kind of overwhelming, but he talks about also some basic approaches, the fact also that PMSs and there's other tech out there where you can figure that out. Although I do believe it's probably equally art and science. That's part of the message I got from him. And certainly when he's talking about promotions, that's definitely more art, or at least a lot of art and science combined. So it's always good to have stuff to be able to do a podcast with somebody that's as knowledgeable as Scott's been doing it for a long time, was an innkeeper for a long time, not before he was an inn owner actually, and is still involved heavily, and being able to get that insight about a subject that some innkeepers aren't always comfortable with, but it's hugely important. So yeah, definitely worth listening to what Scott has to say and follow some of that advice for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Hugely important. And with that in mind, we hope you enjoy this Frictionless Innkeeper podcast interview with Scot Fuller-Beatty, who is the founder of the Bold collaboration. And you'll hear him discuss more about revenue management and creating effective pricing strategies, promotions. And this also is really based on his ALP 2025 presentation. And he was kind enough to share his insights from his conference presentation here today with us. And with that, we hope you enjoy the interview. And Scott, thank you so much for joining us today.
Great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Steve Short, how are you?
Doing well, Matt, but I'm feeling like, I don't know, I'm trying to say something smart. I haven't come up with anything for many episodes and I'm still at a loss. So I'm just happy to be here and happy that Scott's here and happy you're here as well, Matt, actually.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, the good news is we're just starting this podcast. So you probably have about 40 minutes here to come up with something to say to me. So I'll just be on.
I will try my best.
But I love it. Awesome. Well, Scott, it's great to have you. I know we've had you on a previous podcast a couple of years ago and would love to kick it off. Tell us about the Bold collaboration and tell our listeners a little bit about your background as an innkeeper as well.
Yeah, sure. Great. So my journey into innkeeping was totally, in a way, like unassisted by, national or local or state associations. They became a very important part of, I think, of who I am today for sure. But as far as becoming an innkeeper, I sort of fell into it. I was a school teacher, music teacher, actually, taught at a boarding school. And friends of mine who were also teachers said, hey, we know this couple that wants to go to Austria for their 50th wedding anniversary. And they own this inn, but it happens to be during the ski season when it's their high season. And they don't want to close down, but they still want to celebrate this big milestone. I ended up meeting them, working a couple days with them just to kind of see how the process worked. And I have to tell you, I remember the moment when I was in the room with the owner changing a bed, and I just thought, man, this is actually really fun. We just cooked breakfast, had all this great conversation with these guests. We're changing these beautiful linens in this beautiful house. And they went off to Europe for 2 weeks. And while I was on school break, I ran their business for them. And man, it was just something that I fell in love with, and that sort of led to other opportunities to in-sit for other people, which I didn't even know in-sitting was a thing even at that point. And then when I decided to leave teaching, I took a job at another inn in Portland, Maine to get more of like a high-end luxury kind of experience doing that as an assistant innkeeper. And one thing led to another, and it led to me buying a property in Portland, Maine, and being an innkeeper there. After about a year of being in business, I thought, man, this is like the lifestyle I want to live. I love working for myself. I love employing people. I love the whole guest experience. So it was kind of checking all these boxes. And the funny thing is, I went to my first conference. Some listeners will probably remember the Charleston conference from Pi many, many years ago. I was just sitting in the back eating popcorn, like watching the whole thing. And I have to say, my first session that I walked into was a session led by Lisa Kolb on Google and Google Analytics. And I sat down and I had to look at my program 3 times to make sure that I was actually at the right conference in the right room. Everything she was saying was just foreign to me. I had no clue about any of this stuff. For every fourth word maybe that she said, I understood. And that really was the next big spark for me to say, wow, not only do you love this, but wow, there is like, you've only scratched the surface of what to know. And I just remember being at that conference. And although every session wasn't as heavy as that session, I guess you could say, me feeling like I absolutely had no clue what I was doing, I walked away from that conference going, man, there is so much more I could be doing and so much that I need to be thinking of. And even things that I thought I was doing excellent at were ready for a revamp. Going to that first conference and being a national conference was such an eye opening experience for me to say, you don't know what you don't know. And if you want to succeed, you really got to take a second to digest it and start to understand it as well.
That sounds like Lisa's, isn't that her thing? You only know what you know or
Yeah.
something? That was one of, yeah, that was one of her marketing things. Yeah.
Don't know what you don't know. And
Yeah.
I've had that conversation with Lisa many times about how that session just blew my mind. It was a hard right turn to say, wow, you're on this path, but you got all these side journeys you got to explore to make this business as best as you can.
And then you ended up about 3 years ago transitioning management, takeover, whatever of you're in, but you were it's the Chadwick, is that right?
Yep. The Chadwick Bed and Breakfast in Portland. Yep.
Okay. And, but how many years did you have it going? About 15?
I think we've had it for 15. In the last, I think, 2.5 to 3.5 years. Time is getting a little blurry now at this point, but Erin and her husband, Zach, are now leased the property. They're doing an amazing job. Totally different situation. They have a young daughter that also lives there, but they're doing an amazing job. And eventually it will be their name on the property title. So excited for them.
And you've gone into this bold collaboration, which tell us about what that's all about and what you're doing, who your clients are, who you're working with, and how you're helping them.
Yeah. So the bold collaboration, I wanted to move more into a consulting role. As many people know, I, for 8 years, worked at Think Reservations as the director of sales and education.
Yeah.
And that gave me great opportunities to travel to conferences, to meet with lodging owners, specifically in the independent lodging world. It got me working with clients in ways that I don't think traditionally your PMS would necessarily work with you. but it got me learning a lot because I was presenting a lot on topics, having straddled both sides of being an innkeeper, but also being a vendor or an allied partner in the industry. Coming from an education background, I was always keen to just learning what I could because I saw the benefits of participating in conferences and taking notes and applying it to my business. So it just made me want to research and do a lot more. When I reached a point where I said, I'm ready to go back and work for myself and I want to do more of this one-on-one work with properties that, that don't really fall under the job title of a director of sales. That's when I decided it was time to go into do some consulting. And the majority of the work that I do with properties has to do with revenue optimization and management. But I also work with things like operations management and some marketing tools and maintenance. I like to say I'm not a website company, I'm not a marketing company, but I know an awful lot in those areas and also can get you connected to the people that do those things really well. The really nice thing about a lot of the consultants in our industry that work with independent lodging is that we all have kind of our areas of specialty. So we often direct people to another consultant. It's not this competitive industry where we're trying to take each other's clients. We want you to work with the person who is the pro in specific area that you're looking for help.
I'm sorry, I was going to say it's collaborative in that way, not just with your clients, but with other partners or people that they can partner with, because this
Exactly.
is so, there are so many specialized areas. And I think that, especially with innkeepers being, time is always a big challenge. And how much time is there to learn new technology or whatever specialty it is that's important? Like you say, all of these separate roads you had to go down. And if you can go down the road with somebody who's already got the expertise, it's a huge time savings and ultimately a cost savings, right? To do that and to be able to say, hey, that's not really my thing, but so and so over here, it's more their thing. Get some help with them and I'll help you with my thing. That's a good, to me, is the best way to go.
Yeah, definitely. Part of the reason why we chose the name The Bold Collaboration is because we really felt like it's not just us doing work for you, it's us working with you to help grow your business. And that has extended onto our other consulting relationships, our relationships with other vendors, people who provide products and services. So, yeah, it's a big collaborative approach on what works because what worked for me at my property isn't necessarily going to work for you at your property. And vice versa is true as well. So you got to kind of talk through those things and figure out what is right for you and your property.
Cool. So you really want to hit on revenue management, right? You talked about that at the recent ALP annual conference a couple months ago, and you want to talk to us and explain what it's all about and why it's so important. I think everybody knows why revenue is important, and I guess managing it has got to be as important as getting it. So, anyway, yeah, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So one of the questions that I get a lot at conferences, whether it's just I'm walking around and someone stops me and says, "Oh, I saw your presentation," or "I can't wait to see your presentation," or they just have some simple questions. The biggest question I actually get is, what is revenue management? What does that even mean for my property? And we've heard that revenue management, the phrase that I think is often said is it's setting the right price for the right room at the right time. I also think I've added to that it's also through the right channel to maximize your revenue and your profitability. And the reason why I focus on rooms and why we talk about the right price for the right room at the right time through the right channel to maximize that revenue and profitability is because that's what's bringing in the most money. Now, listen, packages, ancillary revenue, like your gift shop sales and those things, yes, those all play a role and they all contribute to guest experience and they give great opportunity for guests to spend more money. But the fact is that the biggest chunk of change that they're spending with you is to just stay the night. So a lot of my focus is around how do we price a room properly? And a lot of times I find that properties have a sense in their mind that my rooms are worth this much. And you're probably going to be the worst judge of what your rooms are worth. And the good news is that most of the time it's because you're undervaluing what you're offering. You're offering something that could generate a much bigger price tag. Rarely do I work with a property that they've overvalued their rooms. Usually it's the case that they've undervalued themselves because they have this, whatever it is, feeling inside that, ah, man, I can't ever go over this particular number. When I first bought my inn, for example, the first season, I kept all the same pricing that the previous owner had. And in the high season in Maine, Portland, Maine in the summertime, come on, what hotel isn't selling out almost every single room every single night? This is why we have huge hotels built every single year in Portland, and it's still happening because people want to come to Portland, Maine in the summer. And when he was selling those rooms, I think the highest price on a summer night was around 165 or 185. And now by the time I left the inn, we were selling those rooms for well over $350 a night. And now they demand over $400 a night and even more because you really have to separate yourself and let your clientele give them that opportunity to tell you what the right price is for them.
So
And
do you
that's where
think
you make a big difference in your bottom line.
what drives that? I guess it's just a lack of knowing, and ultimately it's a fear, right? It's like, okay, I'm afraid to price it higher. Maybe I feel guilty that I shouldn't be charging this much, or is it more, I don't know that the market calls for this kind of pricing. And it's the thing is, I know Google would prefer everything to be commoditized and Amazon, but for our business, the innkeeping business, it's not a commodity because every property is unique, but that doesn't mean people are going to pay $1,000 for a room either, right? The market is in play here and that drives it. But at the same time, you're a unique property and people are looking, not everybody, but certain people are looking for that. And that's who you want to price to, right? I would think. So why did you have that feeling the first year and what holds people back now and what do they need to know and learn about that?
Yeah. So I have a couple key points that I think are really important to think about when trying to figure out what is that right price. And Steve, I appreciate what you said about like, oh, I have this guilt or this concern or something like that. But that is because most people that come into this industry, they are that type A personality. They are the party host. They want everyone to have a good time. And you are usually looked at as that good time person. And a lot of good people want to treat people the way that they feel is fair. But the
Yeah.
truth is that we have businesses to run and we have bills to pay and we have all of these things to do.
Right.
And you have to get out of the mold of always giving and also just learn to receive also.
That's a great, I mean, if you think about it, accommodations, lodging accommodations managed by accommodating people, because that's the business, but you don't want to be so accommodating that you're giving yourself away.
Exactly. So some of the key things that I often talk about, especially when it comes to like data and analysis of that data, I think about forecasting and demand patterns a lot. So predicting those future trends, if you've had a property, you're going to use your historical data. You're going to think about market conditions. You really need to understand those peak and off peak periods so that you can adjust accordingly to where you have that demand. Oftentimes we think in the high season, oh man, like we're charging a bit more for our rooms and we have that occupancy. But the truth of the matter is that low season is just low season because there's less travelers coming through. It's not because there's all these people that are coming and they just aren't choosing you. No, it just means you have less opportunity to sell. So there can be strategies, and one of those strategies is lowering your room rates during those slow periods. But you have to also think about when you do have those high seasons and you look ahead to your calendar and you go, oh man, it is middle of May right now, and I'm looking at June, and June is almost fully booked. That's a great feeling to say, oh man, I must be doing something awesome. But you also have to ask yourself, how many people are you now saying no to that would have said yes because you don't have a room available? And what is the price that they would have been willing to pay? So, really understanding your historic data and those off peak and peaks. And I like to also talk about those peaks within your peaks. We all have those weekends or those weeks where something really special is happening in town and there's going to be a huge demand. Another area that people need to think about is market trends. So, staying informed about industry shifts. What are your competitors doing? What are their strategies? Are there other economic factors that are playing into why people may or may not be traveling to your area or may not be traveling at all? Guest behavior is also another big thing. Looking at booking habits, how soon in advance are people booking? Right now, I would say, and a big thing since COVID is we still are in the trend of a lot of people booking last minute. And some people define last minute very differently. Some people say last minute is day of reservations, day before reservations. Some people think last minute is within the next 2 to 3 weeks. So we don't have an exact term for what is last minute, but understanding how those guests book and especially then tying that to that forecasting, how do they book differently during different times of years? What is their price sensitivity? What are their preferences? What are they looking for? Just a really simple one. People want king beds. If you have a room with a queen bed or a full bed and you can put a king bed in there, just spend the money and get the king bed because that's what people want and people are willing to pay a premium for that, for example. Another area is the competitive analysis. I'll also be the first to admit, when I really started playing with my pricing, I thought I shouldn't look at my competitors' pricing because I don't want to be accused of like hitchhiking on their prices or doing that. But once I really understood that, like, I need to understand what my competitors are getting and how they look like they're booking, follow them on social media, know what the promotions are and how they're positioning on. Back in the day, it used to really be like TripAdvisor and bedandbreakfast.com. Now there's a bunch of places, Google, on the OTA websites, all of that. So really understanding what my competitors are doing, it's not so much price fixing as it is, where do I want to fall in this pack? Do I want to be the leader of this pack when it comes to pricing? Do I want to be competitively priced in the middle? Or maybe my property, based on what I'm doing, it could be the condition of the property, it could be your involvement with the property. Maybe you are going for that low hanging fruit that is just shopping based on price, and you do want to be in that low end category. So, those are questions that you have to ask yourself. And I'm always surprised when I talk to properties and I say, where do you see yourself? Are you the best? Are you the middle? Or are you the worst in town? And there's always a lot of humming and hawing, like, oh, we haven't really thought about that, but we want to be the best. Well, how do we make you the best then?
Yeah. There's a place for everybody in the market, right? Not everybody can afford the best, and it's not necessarily a problem, but I would think that the mindset when it comes to innkeeping is to try to be the best. I don't know that there is a best, right? There can be many different great options, but again, because it's not like a total commodity. I mean, my wife and I are huge bed and breakfast people, and it's like we love the type of thing as well as the high end thing. So it just depends. So interesting. So, anything else you want to talk about in terms of the revenue management basics, really? I mean, you kind of describe what it is: right price for the right room at the right time through the right channel. Any other thoughts on some practical things that innkeepers can do or think about doing if they need? Obviously, they can work with you or another consultant. Any other thoughts on what to focus on?
Steve, that's a loaded question because I could go on for a couple hours. Well, it's the things
All
that you
right.
need to think of. But
Yeah.
Another one of the things that kind of sticks out to me is the segmentation of your market. And the way I look at segmentation is identifying the target guests. Who are the guests that you want to attract at your property? Because, when I'm not saying discriminate against anybody at all, but what I'm saying is think of who you are and the values that you have and what's important to you. Maybe it's really important to you that you serve these knockout, picture perfect breakfasts every day, and you want to be the place that people come because of the breakfast. Maybe you want to focus on a certain segment like LGBTQ. Maybe you want to work with business and leisure versus couples and families. Figuring out what that is, because that's really going to drive where you're spending your money on things like marketing, in the way you design your website, in the offerings that you give. The biggest difference I saw from year 1 to 3 for us was a complete change of the type of guest we were attracting. When I first bought the inn, I was 30 years old. I was the youngest person at conferences for many years. We went from this crowd that was what I would call the traditional B&B guest in their 50s, their 60s, maybe even older, who wanted that a little bit of grandma's house experience, maybe a higher level of elegance, stay in a Queen Victorian home and do all that. But as we started to do simple things like change the color of the living room and buy new furniture and put new art on the walls and change up our menu and really develop our messaging on our website, we started to attract a much younger crowd. So suddenly our average guest was probably, I'd say, 30 to 50. So it really skewed down. And that really worked for us once we started targeting that market. And I'll tell you the number of people that said, man, we've never even stayed at a B&B, but we just fell in love with like what we saw, the fact that you saw me, that you saw my husband, that you saw our younger staff members on our website. Like they were attracted to this isn't grandma's house. This is a whole new way of experiencing being in Portland as opposed to staying in a box room at a hotel.
Yeah, it seems like I mean, what you're talking about, I guess, in larger marketing terms, the ICP, the ideal client profile, this is kind of like an ideal guest profile, but it's got to be in line with your values and what you want to do or what you want your place to be like, right? I don't know if you made that conscious decision or whether you just said, I'm going to update things on my property based upon who I am. Like, I don't like the doilies. We're getting rid of those. We're doing new modern colors and stuff on the walls. And that just ended up attracting a different sort of guest profile or whatever, whether it's chicken and egg thing. What you're saying is figure out who you want that to be, preferably consciously, but it should be in line with what you want to do. Those guests will eventually come. And that's going to drive kind of your brand or your unique thing. And that's hopefully going to drive better revenues ultimately.
Exactly. And there's no right or wrong answer here either.
Right.
There are people, and there's plenty of them, that do want a retreat in their 50s, 60s, and 70s that is that nostalgic bed and breakfast feel. And if that's the business you're running and that's what you're marketing to, and that's the vibe that you're giving, you're going to attract those customers and you're probably happy for that. I'm not saying everybody needs to attract a younger crowd. I'm saying I wanted to attract the people that I knew were going to be, that I was going to jive best with, and people who wanted to come to Portland and experience all of the wonderful things that Portland had for outdoor recreation, for tourist attractions, for all of that. And frankly, it's a great town, and why even our population is skewed to a younger age as well, because it's just an ideal location for that. I think the best way to kind of understand it is, I think when we think about Colorado, we often think of like, oh, outdoor hiking, skiing, lots of fit people who can do these things. And at least that's in my head, that's what Colorado is. So That's just an example of using that. But if I'm going to Boca Raton, Florida, feels a little bit more retirement to me and it attracts a certain guest to go there. So it is about your location, but it's also just about who you are and the type of people that are going to be attracted to not just your sense of style, but just everything about your property, the overall vibe and feel that it gives. Are they excited to be there? And what is excitement for you? What is excitement for your guests? And do they drive?
Okay. So aside from some things to think about, I think you wanted to talk about problems in terms of revenue management, what innkeepers have to deal with in terms of what you define as revenue management.
Yeah. So I have a couple points that I often have conversations with people about. And a lot of that has to do with just a complete lack of a pricing strategy. They just rely on instinct as opposed to data driven strategies to pricing. I've worked with properties that have the same rate all year round, regardless of their demand, no sort of segmentation of room types or guest profiles, and limited or no use of dynamic pricing models. I also think that a lot of that comes from a poor use of data. PMSs today are so different than what they were 15 years ago. The amount of data that you're able to pull out of them to do those market comparisons, to look at occupancy trends, to look at booking pace, I almost love when I sit down with a property and I say, let's look at these reports. And frankly, they just needed someone to help teach them how to read it. And once they have that skill to read it, now they're able to say, oh man, if I did this or if I change this, something as simple as even identifying that, hey, your high season actually starts 2 weeks before you traditionally have started your high season rates. That's 2 weeks of demanding a higher price without losing those bookings. And for businesses that have been in business for 20 plus years, sometimes it just takes that little push to see, oh man, that's not when my high season actually starts. My high season starts a little earlier than that. Or if I pushed out the end of the low season or whatever, that could generate some more demand. I also think that a lot of people think that it's a really manual and time consuming process. And like I said earlier, we got in this because we're the type A personality. We want to host, we want to be hanging out with our guests. I don't care who you are. If you're listening to this podcast, you get a warm, fuzzy feeling when people say, oh, that room is beautiful. Oh, the bed was so comfortable. The food was so delicious. Oh my God, you are so nice. I love your dogs. We love hearing that. We don't like to admit it all the time, but we do. We really love hearing that. So
Yeah.
when we look at some of the tasks like, oh, setting my rates or setting minimum stays or closed on arrival, closed on departure, that's the stuff that we didn't necessarily get into the industry for. So it's not necessarily something that we think about. And those are things that, not only can help generate more revenue for you, but also reduce the workload that you have, saving you time. And as far as I'm concerned, my time is a lot more valuable. The $25 I might have made on your room night because of an automatic yield management rule or something that was put in place, but saving me time to make money is a big deal for me. It actually gives me more time with my guests to do that.
It seems like when you have less revenue problems, you're generally happier, you've got more time, or you can choose how you spend your time. And if that's interacting with your guests more, and you'll be in a better mood when you do interact with them, I would think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think you mentioned a little earlier, there's that fear of raising prices. People hesitate because even raising rates as little as $10, I've seen people get very worried about that they think that they're going to end up with negative reviews or lost bookings. And this occupancy over revenue mindset often leaves money on the table for people. You have to ask yourself, I mean, I know 15 years has gone by, but I've already given you the fact that room rates were $165 to $185 in the peak season. And now we can demand over $400 for those rooms. So the question really becomes now, 15 years ago, were those the right guests for me? And
Right.
it's not that they're bad people. I'm not saying that they're bad people at all, but were they the right guest for the business that I was trying to run? And there's good people on both sides. So it's not a judgment of people. You do have to rely on what the data is telling you. If you've risen prices, but you're able to keep that occupancy consistent, or you're able to find guests that fill those guests who have come back, who have stayed with you in the past, and you're still providing a great experience and still getting and asking for reviews, and you're finding that no, you're not getting these negative reviews or lost bookings, then that's just your go ahead to say you're working on a better strategy when it comes to revenue management for your business.
Yeah. It definitely makes sense. And another part of this too, and then we can kind of wrap up with, because I know you also want to talk a little bit about promotions, but the way I kind of look at this too is that if you're feeling guilty about what you're charging somebody, it's not like they're already in and you decided to increase the rates or something, right? I mean, maybe they stayed with you 2 years ago and paid less. Maybe there's a concern for that, and you definitely want people to come back, but they're making that decision when they book. They can decide not to book, right? I mean, so why is there this guilt factor that I charged them too much? Well, if you charged them too much, they wouldn't have paid you and they would have gone somewhere else.
It's our problem, not their
Yeah, exactly.
problem,
Right.
is what it is. We need to get out of our heads and let our guests drive. Did I go through some guilt and stuff like that when I suddenly crossed over the 250 and then eventually the 300 mark and then the 350 mark? Yeah, there was a little concern, but the reports, the numbers were telling me that it's not hurting my business, it's helping my business. So then you can go deeper in yourself and say, well, how do I get rid of that guilt for myself? Well, maybe instead of just offering half and half, now you have oat milk, soy milk, and almond milk all available to the guests. Okay. Low costs, but it makes you feel an awful lot better for charging 50, 60, 100, $150 more per night.
Right. Yeah.
How do you then translate the cost into the experience that you want in a way that's not costing you a ton of time? We're already going to the grocery store, so why not come up with great options and great amenities? What do we do? Do we switch from the Walmart sheets to a better brand sheet? Do we offer more little things in the bathroom? What are those other things that we can be doing to really say it was worth your stay? Even with what you guys do with the Frictionless Guest App, like that is a huge thing that can make or break someone's trip. And it's really something that, like, man, I didn't even know I could do all this stuff, and you've wrapped it up in a nice package for me. That's a value add right there. So I'm not saying make your money and run to the bank and take a 2-week vacation every 3 months.
Like that.
Matt does. But besides Matt, how do you then translate that into the better guest experience? And I think that's actually the cure for getting over yourself and your own fear of pricing yourself based on what your market is telling you, your clients are telling you you can charge and the experience that you want to provide. That's the actual cure. What do I now do with that extra coin that I have?
Yeah. Matt just woke up, I think, after we mentioned him. So where are we time wise? We probably want to finish up soon, but I know we wanted to hit on promotions a little bit, right, Matt?
Yeah, if we can touch on that a little bit, I think we're good, and then we can wrap it up.
Can that be the last question, or do you have to still ask your last question, Matt?
There's nothing set in stone here on the Frictionless Innkeeper
That's
podcast.
true, man.
You
Wing
make
it. Wing it.
We could do the promotions, the last topic, and then I can just take us out.
All right.
I'm going to throw in just one more thing that is really important to me before we actually move on to the promotions. And that is about distribution and inventory management. Because I think that's an area where we have a love-hate relationship with OTAs, online travel agencies, sites like Booking.com, Expedia, Airbnb, and all of the other brands that fall, especially under the Booking.com and Expedia brands.
Is there really love involved, or when that's love hate, or is it just more hate?
Tell you, there's a lot of hate, but I like to turn the tables on this and say the reason why people hate them is because your mindset is, man, they're taking all this money from me. And when we turn the tables around, I think the real problem is that we give them too much. And we need to think about using OTAs in the way that they promise they're going to help us, which is when they are soliciting your business to sign up for their platforms, they say, we want to help you book more room nights and we want to help you make more money. So what do? We sign up, we give them all of our inventory, we just put it out there, we follow their rules about pricing. Some of us break it. We know what the contracts say. We try to skirt around it. We do all sorts of things to try to make that commission back somehow. But we're thinking about it in the wrong way, because if we just give everything to them, think about your own website. Your own website has hundreds of eyes on it in, say, a week. But their websites, because of the money that they're spending on marketing and all that, has hundreds of thousands of eyes on their websites. And frankly, there's no reason why the most popular dates to stay with you and to book through your website or to give you a call to make a reservation, there's no reason why those aren't the most popular dates and times for people to make reservations through their website at your property. So when we don't work with OTAs with an actual strategy, with a distribution and inventory strategy, then because they have so many more eyes on their website, they're going to book those rooms faster than you can. And I've sat in meetings with property owners with their Booking.com or Expedia representative to say, look at all this money we generated for you this year. But I'm able to then look at the reports and say, yeah, but you sold rooms that, given enough time, the property would have been able to book that on their own. So this is where the mindset, and if anything is taken away from today's podcast, what I'd like listeners to think about is that working with OTAs, we got to hold them to their promise to book more rooms and to make us more revenue. And the only way we're going to actually do that is if they're selling stuff that we have determined we are not going to be able to sell without the assistance of them. Instead of thinking, man, I just lost 20% on that OTA reservation that just came in. When you have a real distribution and inventory strategy with OTAs, that mindset changes to, I just made 80% of what would have been $0. So when you get that switch to go off in your mind, I get excited when I see OTA reservations come in, because for whatever reasons, I have determined I am not going to fully book that night. I'm not going to reach 100% occupancy for that night. And I want to be able to sell everything, all that I can. So all of those things play in the way you priced your room, maybe your automatic yield management strategy, maybe, your seasonal pricing. It all creates this huge web. And when you start to throw in OTAs, you got to hold OTAs to their promise, which is to help you make more money and to help you sell more rooms. Don't let them just sell the rooms that you would because they have more eyes on their website than your own website.
Yeah. Then you have a right to be mad because you're giving them money that you didn't need to give them.
Yep.
Okay. Promotions.
So I really look at promotions as like a crafting hobby because you want to find promotions that are going to support all the things that we've already talked about today. Attracting the right guest that adds value, that generates revenue, and doesn't just cut into your profits.
So can you define promotion in your mind? Because there's a lot of different ways to promote. You're talking about typically lowering prices in some way to attract people, or
So
how
lowering
would you describe it?
is a strategy. It is a strategy, but I like to think that not all promotions are created equal. A good promotion, in my opinion, it adds value, it attracts the right guest, it generates revenue for you, and it doesn't just cut into your profits. So that's why I have really thought about promotions as value added. How do we think about value added promotions to help maintain ADR and to help enhance guest experience without just jumping right to the discount? Because not everybody is looking for a discount. So, some examples of that, simple examples of that, free room upgrades. Now, I've gone back and forth with property owners about this a little bit, but as far as I'm concerned, if I have you at my property and you've booked the least expensive room, and I have the most expensive room or the second most expensive room open, and I know I'm not going to book it, what harm is it to me to just upgrade you to that room at no charge to you? What is that going to gain for me?
I wish you were my innkeeper because I would hugely appreciate that. And that would be remembered forever, right? Like, wow, we didn't even ask for anything and they gave us this. And that's, to me, that's what it's all about is under promising and over delivering, right? And that makes a huge impression. That's the same thing with our whole idea, like with partnering with local businesses where you go in and they say, oh, wow, you're staying at the Chadwick. Awesome. Have a seat. Here's a free glass of wine. Wow, we weren't expecting that, right? That's
Exactly. And it costs me nothing more. Sure, maybe it takes me a little bit longer to clean that room or change your reservation in the reservation system, but ultimately, it doesn't cost me really a penny more to do that if I have it available. So the room I want to have the most filled all the time is my best room because I know that guest is going to walk away going, wow, we didn't even ask for this. We got a better experience. And it opens up the door for more conversations. And then at the end of the stay, it's great to say when they're telling you all the wonderful things about their stay, and you then slip in that, hey, we would love you to write that experience on either Google or TripAdvisor. As a matter of fact, you're going to get an email or a text message from us later today with links to that. Make sure to mention that. There's no harm in actually saying, like, you just thanked me for something. Here's the best way you can thank me by putting it into a review. Complimentary items and activities, welcome gifts, especially if they're locally sourced or have something really connected to your brand.
right. Yeah.
And also packages. Now, packages are, yes, we talk about packages all the time, but what I'm talking about is packages where the room rate is combined with all of the other things that are going to be part of this. And why is this important for guests? Because it's one buying decision. It's not, man, I just spent all this money on a room and now I want to add all these other things. No, packaging is crafting. It's being able to craft an overall experience for guests, and it leaves them with only one buying decision instead of multiple buying decisions. One of my favorite innkeepers who is now retired, Heidi Lanford, who owned the Iris in Virginia, she once said to me, and it's always stuck with me, is that with guests, when you're making a reservation, you're shopping with one purse. You're spending money out of that purse. And she was a master at 2 weeks, 1 week before arrival. They would start a little drip campaign of upselling to their guests. Add these flowers, add this sip and stay experience, upgrade to this room, do these things. And she said, because by the time they are about to arrive or by the time they get there, they have a second purse that they're pulling money out of. They forget that they already spent the other money. So you got to take those opportunities to be able to, not milk your guests. Get out of that mindset. You're not milking them for money. You're trying to help make them have the best experience possible so they tell their friends and family and coworkers and the world through online reviews that you're the place to go. That's where you need to experience it. So I really look at that instead of thinking of promotions as discounts. First, think of them as how do I add value to a stay and what is that extra value what does that extra value translate to when it comes to the price? And there's tons of other ways. I mean, there's tons of other ways. We talk about last minute booking specials. Those are great times where, yes, we maybe do want to offer a discount, but you can also offer great things like, the things we're already doing, like promote the fact that you have free breakfast. If you're able to accommodate late checkouts and early check-ins and not have a fee for that. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't have a fee for that, but that might be the one thing that someone just really needs that is going to really increase their value in staying with you. Especially if you have them on the phone and they say, "Hey, I see your check-in's not till 4 o'clock at night, but our plane lands at 11:30. Is there any chance we might be able to get in?" Well, sure. Early check-in is usually an extra $50, but because you called to make your reservation and you seem really excited about coming, I'm going to put you down that we're going to get you in for free. We're going to waive that early check-in fee for you. You didn't lose any money. You've probably made your day a lot shorter. Checkout's at 11, so, hopefully you can get that room turned in time and do that. There's a lot of great ways to do that. And then as far as overall revenue generation, being able to offer things like flash sales, there's times of year where we need to get money in the account. For me, it was January and March. That's when our funds and bank account were always at the lowest because high season was right around the corner. But if I was able to run a promotion for something in the future to get reservations and deposits in today, that ultimately helps with that cash flow to make sure that that $1,000 heating bill that you have that you don't have in the summer when, you have big money coming through the door, but you have that $1,000 bill that you got to pay right now for the heating oil, that's a great way to help smooth out that transition for you.
Cool. Matt, might as well take us out.
Well, this concludes this Frictionless Innkeeper podcast interview with Scot Fuller-Beatty, who's the founder of the Bold Collaboration. And Scot was kind enough to discuss really the essentials of revenue management, especially around creating effective pricing strategies and compelling promotions to drive bookings and enhance profitability. And our podcast is brought to you by the Frictionless Guest App, the digital concierge that helps your guests to live like locals. Learn how at frictionlessguest.com. Once again, that's frictionlessguest.com. And Scot and Steve, thank you so much for your time today.
It was great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Scott. We appreciate the time.